All right, so thanks for the intro. Actually, tiny correction, OriginTrail is the decentralized knowledge graph. So yeah, just kind of a sentence, two or more about who we are. So we as Trace Labs we're like your parity to the Polkadot or whatever. So Trace Labs is the core developer of OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph. I'll explain it a little bit today. We basically started the company almost 10 years ago, and back then we started as a proprietary centralized company that was building essentially knowledge sharing solutions with what we knew at the time. We didn't really know much about decentralization when we started. And over time, we actually went fully decentralized, fully open source, and standardized in many ways. So today I'll share a little bit about that and what is the actual vision for OriginTrail and how you can use what we're building. So I'll start with a problem, as I guess usually is the best way to start. And essentially, I like to point one fact out, that we're in the middle of a new knowledge revolution. Essentially, the first knowledge revolution was, in a way, the revolution that kickstarted with the invention of the printing press. So essentially, we all of a sudden got this amazing tool to replicate knowledge, and essentially we solved the problem of knowledge scarcity. With that, I'm sure you know many really cool things came about in the world. Feel free to come in, man. It's open. All right. So essentially, all great things, Renaissance and everything. I think everybody kind of knows about that. And then after this revolution came the next one. So we had the whole internet revolution. Knowledge sharing became kind of a very common thing, and we solved the problem on fragmentation. Essentially, knowledge fragmentation was what we had before. We had the connectivity as the key way to solve it, and through the networks, Ethernet, Internet, and all the other networks that we're kind of now building all together here, we're tackling this problem effectively for a long time. And with that problem, we actually have abundance of information now. And the problem with abundance usually comes with also a problem of, you can call it problem of spam, or generally problem of when there's a lot of something, there's usually some of that is crap or actually wrong. So the next knowledge revolution, I'd like to make the case today, is happening right now. It's actually happening with AI. And we already basically have a huge problem of misinformation happening all around. I'm sure you guys know about like all these things like fake news and deep fakes, and these are just some manifestations. But generally, it's very hard to, sort of decouple information from misinformation. And it's going to become harder because now we have AI that can go ahead and hallucinate all kinds of things. People are going to be using it like crazy. So we believe that the solution to this particular problem and what is going to come about with this new knowledge revolution is really decentralized AI. So I'll try to explain the vision of OriginTrail behind that in the next slides. Just a little bit more about the problem. I'm sure you guys heard about this guy, the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, recently left Google. He's the guy behind the LLMs, basically. One of the researchers that's why he was named the godfather of AI in the first place. And he basically left Google so he can talk about this problem freely, and he's very afraid of LLMs and the AI that comes out of it. And I'm sure you're hearing all kinds of news. Just yesterday we heard this scary thing about, I don't know if you heard about it, but some army AI thing did a simulation where it actually killed the guy who was running the imaginary guy in its world was running the simulation, or something along that sort. Also, funny thing that was a little bit more real happened just recently. A couple of days ago, I took a screenshot. Some lawyer actually used ChatGPT to actually, basically come up with the documentation needed for the case. And they used ChatGPT and they got a bunch of quotes to some legal documents that never existed. So, is this a benevolent mistake or intentional? Probably, like, the guy didn't want to get in trouble. So it was probably, as we all are in a rush, he was trying to, come up with something. And ended up creating misinformation and probably not even, being a bad guy behind it in a sense. Not best practice, I would definitely not say you should do this, but more and more of this will happen. And this is just like a kind of a minimal example. It's already happening right now. So, so with OriginTrail, we're trying to build fundamental, trustless, open technology, Web3 based to tackle such problems. And I'll try to explain in the coming slides how that works. There's a lot of stuff to cover. So maybe, since we actually have quite some time, 30 to 40-ish minutes, I'm totally open if you guys want to just like randomly jump in with a question somewhere. Just raise your hand. I guess we can do that, right? Maybe you can help bring awesome. Thanks, man. Because maybe some of the slides are not so clear, or just the way I talk. So feel free to jump in. We can make it a conversation as well. So all right, basically what we're trying to tackle is the problem of misinformation. And one of our the mission statement of OriginTrail is really to organize trusted knowledge, or what we call knowledge assets, and to make them discoverable, verifiable, and AI ready. And that means what I'll show you in a bit. So just a little bit about us. I won't go too deep. Like I said, we started back in the day, 2013. 2018 launched the first version of OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph on Ethereum. It is actually a decentralized network that sits on top of blockchain as a decentralized network. So it's not a blockchain-based protocol just sitting on the blockchain. Rather, you can think of it kind of like IPFS, but it's with knowledge graph powers. So like IPFS with superpowers in a way. And this network sits, like I said, outside the blockchain and has been launched 2018. It has its own token called Trace or Track. You might have ran into it. And so since then, actually went ahead and expanded to, because it's a multi-chain decentralized knowledge graph, it went to Polygon, Gnosis, and last year also on Polkadot. So we launched a custom OriginTrail pair chain with some custom developments there, and we're actually running that for a year now. Meanwhile, we've been very successful with adopting the technology in the enterprise space. So you can see here some of the companies who are sharing actually security audits using OriginTrail in a privacy-preserving fashion, using the decentralized knowledge graph. And you can see a quote from Dan Pertel, the Group Innovation Director of BSI, British Standards Institution, who is one of our partners, long-year partners. We also work with the Swiss Railway Company. The Swiss Railway Company has 4 different solutions built on top of OriginTrail. They track trains, train parts, events, actually particularly security-related events. For example, events such as, think of train tracks. They can split actually. There's like, they get welded, but if it splits, literally the train goes off tracks and, well, all shit breaks loose, right? So they're trying to use all kinds of data which they collect from different welding partners, using the decentralized network to basically infuse trust into it, so then they can actually use it for prediction. So they're running different kinds of queries to understand what and why do these weldings break, so they can understand, aha, this will happen, I don't know, a year from now in that part of the country. Things like that. They also track different things because it is good for efficiency. So those are just some of the partners. We also have some partners traditionally from the supply chain industry. Basically all of them using OriginTrail in some of their solutions. So maybe you've seen this before. I won't go too deep into it, but if you're interested in knowing how it works, and there's a lot of the information on our website, and you can also approach us later. There's a bunch of us from the team here sitting around, so you can also ask us how it actually works and what do these companies do. So all right, how do we tackle misinformation? So I'm going to present a couple of tools that will help us basically approach the solution to this problem. But let's first establish one big sort of point when it comes to trust in data or information. Trust really has 2 enemies. One is bad character. Actually, the more appropriate photo, I think here instead of these generic people would be SBF. But like, I guess it's okay like this too. So we have bad character and we have bad data. And essentially bad character, like SBF, we cannot really eliminate this. This is always going to be there. And but with bad data, we can do something. And this is a challenge that we can tackle, at least to some degree. So, bless you, we're not going to be tackling bad character per se. So how does OriginTrail work? OriginTrail basically synergizes blockchains and knowledge graphs. And you can think of it as, in the simplest possible terms, some three-layer structure like this. So you have the layer one with blockchains. Layer two is this decentralized knowledge graph, this network I told you about, which is its own decentralized network. And on top of it, we can envision all kinds of knowledge applications. And the knowledge coming from the knowledge graph essentially is it's kind of a construction coming from the semantic web world. If you ever heard about the original Web 3.0 coined by Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who invented the World Wide Web, basically they talk about the web of data, or the semantic web of data. Basically, kind of the difference between the original web being that they had like relatively unstructured documents on the web, while the idea was to go and essentially, instead of sharing documents, rather share data, so that that vision of the semantic web gets achieved. Many reasons why I think it hasn't really been achieved so far. Big reason is Web3 didn't exist. If you actually go and look into Tim Berners-Lee architecture for this semantic web, you'll see all kinds of things, URIs, query languages, and you stack it up, and on top of that, there's like a small cherry on top like thing which says trust. And the trust was kind of the last thought that they had, but that makes sense, because at the time when they were coining this, which was 20 plus years ago, it wasn't really something that was as interesting as today, and we didn't have the things like we have today with Web3. So in many ways, OriginTrail somehow marries this old Web 3.0 vision of semantic web, Tim Berners-Lee, and the new Web 3. And essentially, it's like I said, it's a multi-chain decentralized knowledge graph, or DKG for short. The key primitive are these knowledge assets, which I'll explain in a bit more. Essentially, knowledge NFTs. And they have a very cool property. So they have a verifiable data origin, an information trail. See what I did there. And it was, like I said, launched 2018. It's a permissionless system, so there's no like admin or some sort. Blockchains are really used as a trust layer. And as we believe, blockchains are really great trust networks. And the DKG is really this semantic network, or really kind of a data layer, if you may think of it as so. The reason knowledge graphs really being great for data, they're like your ultimate, in a way, database, depending on what you're looking for. But if you're looking for something that can map out the real world, different types of models, different types of things, you'll find knowledge graphs there. And where is that being used today? In Web 2, it's all over the place. We just don't see it. It's under the hood. So Google invented it, basically coined the term knowledge graphs. They said actually the explanation of knowledge graphs is things, not strings. So instead of moving from like data in string form, we move to things that have a specified type, a certain structure or ontology really applied to a certain knowledge domain. So for example, you can encode inside of the data, you can encode, let's say, a bunch of your business logic in these ontologies. I won't go too deep into that, but basically think of it as a kind of a very clever system for mapping and storing knowledge, and then having a specific standardized W3C standardized query language for that, which is actually called Sparkle in this case. While the blockchain in OriginTrail is really used for not to store a bunch of data, so as obviously that would be a very costly, but also because knowledge graphs are great for that, there's no reason to put blockchain like in the same function as knowledge graphs. Rather, it's used for things like decentralized identity, fingerprinting of data, actually Merkle roots of the graphs, and ownership. So essentially, it kind of looks like this. We have this knowledge asset, which contains knowledge, which is this set of information that is structured in this standardized form, either RDF, but also knowledge graph embeddings and similar things. Feel free to jump in, sir. It has this uniform asset locator, or UAL, which is this OriginTrail version of URLs, which basically combines also two things. So the pink part being on the blockchain, we have this knowledge asset NFT, which gets minted when you publish this knowledge, and the state proofs. So essentially, if you create a knowledge asset, you basically put the data on the DKG, you create an NFT and a proof that corresponds with that data on the blockchain that you pick out of the blockchains that are available. And that also creates kind of a combined identifier, this UAL, which basically is an extension, like I said, of a URL. It combines a DID of the record on the blockchain, so of this NFT, DID meaning the decentralized identifier also by W3C standard, and the knowledge graph identifier. So basically, they're self-dereferenceable identifiers. You don't need like a trusted DNS in between. You can just look up the right NFT on the blockchain yourself, and then you can find the right record in the knowledge graph, or you can use the client that does both things for you. If you're the owner of the NFT, that means you can also manage that knowledge. So you can update it. You can do all kinds of things, and whenever you do that, another state proof is created, basically. So it's a Merkle proof, so you can also have all kinds of cool things, like if it's a lot of knowledge, you can show that certain component or part is also part of that, because you can construct a Merkle proof around it. But long story short, you can kind of think of this as like your Git branch. Like you have some data, then because you have rights to update that branch, you create a new commit. That's a new state, essentially, and you can basically go throughout states. So it's not something that we haven't seen. It's just kind of a thing that lives on a couple of networks. And then basically all of this is indexed in the DKG. What does that mean? So that means that you can basically run queries against this data, this knowledge in the basic in the knowledge assets, all of them together. So if you, let's say you were to try and create one, and you take the JavaScript client dkg.js, you could instantiate the client, and you can just do your regular CRUD stuff. So this would be how you would create it. So you take the knowledge in JSON LD form, some options, you publish it on the network, then you get a UAL, so you can also resolve it via GET, just like HTTP GET. You can also update the knowledge asset, and then because of the knowledge asset NFT, you can of course transfer it. So we have this classic NFT interface under the hood. And obviously you can get owners, you can get all kinds of other things like proofs and so on. These are just some examples. So we like to think of it as a kind of a CRUD rather than a CRUD, create, read, update, transfer. So that's basically what knowledge assets are about. And the cool part about it is this knowledge part up there, if I can click on this thing. Yeah, so in there is the secret sauce that basically gets this semantic properties. So having the ability to query all of the knowledge assets, the entire decentralized knowledge graph of knowledge assets comes from there. And also obviously the blockchain part, having the regulating the integrity and also the ownership of these knowledge assets. So what can we put in this knowledge? We'll talk a little bit more about that over the next slides. But essentially the way you can sort of think of it is kind of having one decentralized knowledge graph, which has a bunch of knowledge assets rooted in multiple blockchains around. Obviously taking benefits of different blockchain ecosystems, be that security or speed or just some custom logic that's implemented there, or just community or benefits that you might want to get. So we're building this in a, as we like to say, blockchain agnostic manner. So for example, if you were to think about something like an LLM, let's try to have an example. What benefits can an LLM have from, or just any AI solution from knowledge assets? Well, we basically get the verifiable information origin, because there's a transaction you can follow, as well as ownership. We see the update trail of the information. Data, all the data has integrity, because you can always check if it hasn't been changed or modified in a certain way. And the most cool part actually here is this semantic representation, this knowledge graph properties that you get. So for example, we've just done a POC. I think I have a slide on that as well. POC of something that looks very much like ChatGPT, but it doesn't generate the answers. It actually extracts answers from knowledge assets. So I'll show that in a minute, actually. I do have a slide, which is ChatDKG, actually. So we're just launching basically a new initiative. And this might be interesting for builders, by the way, because we have a 1 million track token bounty, or rather grant program, where you can actually apply with tools or solutions that you would like to build that would fall under the auspices of this ChatDKG framework. So I'll try to explain it in a bit and basically how you can use it. But this should be a video that basically illustrates kind of the concept, and I hope it plays. Let's see. And maybe one more time. No. Okay, maybe it doesn't want to play. So I can explain it. Essentially, think of an interface where you can ask a question rather than shoot a database query. You actually ask a natural language question. You have the ability to somehow understand the query from that natural language question. The software can, for example, and then it's able to extract the answer from the whole decentralized knowledge graph and showing you where these answers are coming from. For example, if the question is my, I don't know, sneaker built from, like, I don't know, is it built in a sustainable way? You will be able to get sustainability reports coming from whoever issued those knowledge assets, somebody ideally with authority. So you can see, okay, who said something, who created some report, and that answer actually has a verifiable origin, verifiable data trail, and obviously ownership. So unfortunately, I cannot show you the video, but I can show you later, maybe on the laptop if you like to see. So what is this framework about? Basically, the idea is to create an open framework, which is relatively broad, which focuses on search, really utilization and access of trusted knowledge. And the idea is to build components that somehow either integrate or are already AI-based or integrate with AI solutions so that you can basically bring the trusted knowledge into the AI space. These are the objectives. So we want to create tools that basically are based on both knowledge assets and AI, establish best practices for all of these things, and really generate, and that's an important point as well, a trusted open knowledge base. So it's also about sourcing trusted knowledge from different verifiable sources, obviously. Now, what are verifiable sources? It's a good question. Essentially, the idea is to utilize decentralized identities so you can actually find that a certain particular entity who has certain knowledge assets was actually behind some information. If you can think of conceptually about this framework, the idea is that ideally you have something which is already relatively structured as data sources, and that's like open data, personal information, something from like enterprise software like the ones we work with, for example, Swiss Railway Company, SAP, things like that, or generally IPFS or any type of data source. This could also be blockchain, but generally the focus here not being to create another indexer where you're looking to, let's say, query the latest price on a certain token pair in Uniswap or something like that. Rather, it's more about potentially doing some sort of semantic query on a blockchain. Like you could, for example, ask what are the 3 addresses that have these perform these activities. That could be something for which the blockchain could be the data source. For that, you need to turn data into knowledge somehow. So this is basically this structuring element, adding ontologies, things like that. So it's not a trivial task, but one of the cool things that can help there is also AI. If you do it well, and if you cover the basis, you can use these tools to actually create knowledge. And then we get to this middle part, this AI-ready knowledge. Essentially having 2 key components here. You have some knowledge bases, and one thing I didn't mention previously is that not all of the knowledge has to be public. The knowledge can actually remain in knowledge, as we call them, knowledge vaults within the OriginTrail system, but also existing knowledge graphs or just knowledge bases that are present in the world of whatever enterprise or just general institutions or whoever has a bunch of data. For example, Google Knowledge Graph. And on the other hand, we have some indexing infrastructure. How do you somehow sift through this knowledge? Like you need some ways of having the efficient ability to build search on top, which is this next layer, this AI knowledge interface components. And on top of that, finally, some AI solutions. So the point here being is that we're looking to build things on the spectrum of all of these gray elements here. And if you're looking to experiment with such tools, and if you're interested in the trusted knowledge assets, then this could be something for you, and you could actually participate in building the DKG Open Framework. One of the kind of key ideas behind it is combining this symbolic and neural approach in the world of AI. Actually, knowledge graphs come from this older branch of symbolic AI, which is, in a way, you can look at a knowledge graph looking at this kind of graph database thing on the left, And then one of the cool things is when you combine that with this new world of neural LLM data processing, essentially, you can create something called knowledge graph embeddings. And that is basically different kinds of vectors from the data in the knowledge graph. These vectors represent, or rather encode, semantic information that comes from the knowledge on the side. And you can use for all kinds of things. Semantic search is one, so you're able to actually search by vector similarity rather than by, keyword search, like it used to be kind of the name of the game until recently. But also you can do all kinds of other cool things. For example, knowledge prediction. You can take elements in the knowledge graph that are missing, and you can figure out, based on certain models and embedding strategies, what data is probable data or probable outcome of certain knowledge. On the other hand, from classic knowledge graphs, ontologies also have reasoning capabilities. And these reasoning capabilities are not generative or probabilistic in nature. Rather, they're actually based on essentially computing logic. So you can basically apply the principles of basic logic and derive certain knowledge out of your existing knowledge. It's a bit of a longer topic, but it's essentially, it's like I said, this older branch of AI, which is really good because it complements the new, let's say, autocomplete LLM world with something which is very strict and actually is mathematical. So it's not probabilistic, rather deterministic. So in that sense, combining those two, the idea is that we can do all kinds of interesting things. What do we want to do particularly? For example, we want to do semantic search. This is a brief explanation of a proof of concept we just delivered for one of our partners, which basically involved creating knowledge assets out of their documents. And on the right, you can see basically the flow. So the organization documents or the original data basically went through a certain graph builder component, which applied a certain ontology and actually added a certain set of knowledge graph embeddings using BERT. So to produce these knowledge assets, we got basically a certain pipeline going. And from that moment on, when they were there, you can actually run a natural language question on it. So actually, we ran it through both the vector similarity search approach and the term search approach, the classic. You can consider this your elastic search if you've done something with that. And then basically out of the search results coming, like basically filtering these knowledge assets, we had a graph reasoner applied in the end, which kind of decides what is the best or the best candidate answers. But the big point here that you get is, apart from the algorithm, which is not part of OriginTrail per se, what is basically the core primitive here are knowledge assets. And of the knowledge assets, apart from getting the answer content and the related knowledge assets because they're all part of a certain graph, you also get a bunch of interesting information. Source document, for example, who's the owner of the knowledge asset, who was the issuer, because it might not be the same as the owner, as like we've seen, the ownership can be transferred or sold or whatever. We get these blockchain immutability proofs, and of course, because of search, you need some sort of confidence score or relevance score at the end. And okay, ultimately, you can also use user feedback and basically get some more, information going into it, and basically somehow iterate and either add this information to knowledge assets or somehow enhance your algorithm. So this is an example. This is not what we're trying to build, not the only thing. But for example, you could build something like this. And if it's according to the proposition of ChatDKG framework, you can apply for a grant. So just to give you a bit of a context. So what are the high priority areas we're looking for? We're looking for these four. We're looking for semantic search over knowledge assets. So what you've seen, sort of like what you've seen previously, that was just one POC. We're not claiming we know how to do this best. We did this for the first time in our life, so maybe you guys know better. And if you do, please get in touch. The other part is really natural language querying over DKG. So for example, here you can think of something like a GPT-based Sparkle query generator. So the idea is, like I said, Sparkle, this is like this knowledge graph language, which pretty much is like SQL, but for knowledge graphs, so it looks very similar. It's relatively similar to the logic of GraphQL as well, though it's more look-alike to SQL. And let's say instead of doing a search over some knowledge assets and then drilling down into the right one, you can even immediately formulate a query. So if, for example, the query can be expressive enough, so you find the results directly inside, that's something that could be built and is one of the high priority areas of the ChatDKG framework. Generally, we're also looking for AI-based knowledge publishing tools. So something that could help, because knowledge publishing is not such an easy task. It always has this knowledge structuring component, and you have to somehow take care of identity in this particular case. Each knowledge graph entity has essentially by semantic web a URI as an identifier. So it's not just like, bam, I publish some file. It's a little bit more work, but that work pays off later in these capabilities of running all of these queries and the cool stuff that you can do. So basically, tools that help with that, make the UX better, make it easier in a certain language, those things that are interesting. And generally, AI system integrations. For example, if you have an idea, something doesn't fall into these categories, but you have some cool idea that you can leverage knowledge assets with an AI tool, that's also applicable. So even outside of that, if we didn't cover it with these four, if you have some cool idea, just give us a ring. What criteria it needs to basically withhold is that it has to be a public open source project. So it cannot be like something proprietary you build and don't share with the community. Has to apply to knowledge asset. It has to solve a meaningful problem. And obviously, you have to do this in basically active community development. So what we are looking for actually is also to learn from each other. So we have obviously an OriginTrail Discord group and ChatDKG dedicated channels, so you can actually come and share this and learn together with the people who are building this also. There's also going to be, like I said, a grant, 1 million trace tokens, which basically you can apply for if your solution falls under the auspices of that previous slide. And the idea is to basically, in a way, again, build components that help tackle misinformation. And it's going to be a journey. We cannot build this in a day. So ideally, we all build this somehow together. There's also going to be a steering committee. So it's not going to be me who picks. Maybe I'm going to be part of the steering committee, but essentially the idea is that we're looking for people who are also knowledgeable in these areas, Web3, knowledge graphs, semantic search, AI, things like that, who would be ideally supporting this effort. So it can be you guys. We're also looking for folks from academics. We literally just started this last week, so it's super fresh. And the steering committee will be responsible for these things, as you can see. So basically guiding the development, supporting builders, and facilitating these discussions, but ultimately also picking who gets the grants. So we're looking for applications. If you're interested, they're going to open up soon, but before that, you can also approach us and chat about it. So yeah, that's the first step, and then later we build and we spend this cool budget together. So you can join the channel by scanning the QR code or just coming to OriginTrail Discord. There's a community that's already there and interested in building all kinds of things. Be happy to see you guys there. And I didn't manage to share too many things about OriginTrail in depth. I didn't want to. But if you're looking to know how the technology works, what you can do with it, what type of tools we have, it's not just me, it's a bunch of people here around. You'll see them in OriginTrail shirts or maybe this DKG shirt. Feel free to approach us. We're super happy to hear your feedback or questions or whatever. Also, questions can be said now, I suppose, because it's an open discussion time. Thank you for the attention, folks.
Hey. Thanks for presentation. Really cool. I have two questions. What's the payment model for your clients? So how they pay? And the second one, you mentioned native tokens. So what will be the use cases for it?
Okay. So question number one. We as TraceLabs as a company, we have these clients. We're basically like the Swiss Railway company, for example. They would come in and they would ask for a certain solution to be built. And we either find some partner to help them build it, or we help them integrate OriginTrail directly. But the prerequisite is they have to build it with OriginTrail. Otherwise, we are not, like, it doesn't make sense for us to do it. The way they pay for it, obviously, if we build something custom, we charge them for it. But however, what we also help them do is onboard to the technology. So one of the big hurdles of enterprises so far has been that they actually, at least since 2018, they've always had problems putting the crypto tokens on their balance sheets. So it's really a problem of how do they go and buy trace tokens, and so they can publish knowledge to. So what we actually built is something called network operating system. I think I have a slide on that somewhere. Just a second. Which is basically a tool. These are some of the solutions. I don't have a slide, I'm sorry. It's basically kind of a Web 2 to Web 3 onboarding platform for enterprises. They pay a certain amount of credits in euros, which they can pay, and then we basically provision tokens for them. We go and buy it on an open market on an exchange. And then with these tokens, they publish knowledge assets as they create them. So the model is, we build something maybe custom for them, but essentially we are selling these subscriptions to this network operating system, as we call it. And we actually see them as network operators. For example, Swiss Railway Company has over 20 companies who are publishing knowledge assets, but through their account. So it was the easiest way to onboard them. Same goes for BSI. So that's I guess question number one. Question number two was about native tokens.
It's the part you answered already.
Yeah, basically, maybe one thing I didn't mention, there's two tokens actually always in play. So there's the blockchain token, and then there's the trace token. And essentially double the problem, right, for balance sheet. So we help them buy both. But essentially, the blockchain token is always, basically encapsulating this utility of the blockchain, right? So using the blockchain, while the trace token is the utility of the DKG. So publishing knowledge assets, essentially. You have to use a certain amount of trace tokens to satisfy the fee market of these nodes who are running the OriginTrail DKG. By the way, right now, we're in version 6. We just launched that in December. The network has around 115 nodes, if I'm not mistaken, run by the OriginTrail community. I see Nikita nodding the head because our infrastructure responsible, so it's correct number. But the previous version, version 5, was actually having 2,000 nodes being ran on the network around the world. So yeah, we see it as a good achievement, but it's also a challenging one because it's quite hard to manage such a network. It takes a lot of energy, but it's worth it for the principles and the benefits from the technology. So I guess, I don't know, did I answer your questions? We have some other ones as well. Awesome.
Hello, I'm Rulo.et. So
Hello.
I saw here in your website that you have solution for identity solutions. So do you have a plan to integrate ENGS domains inside your application or project, and also logging with Ethereum?
Absolutely. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is we're looking for ENS-like standardized, let's say, solutions that can, and anybody who's, by the way, in the identity space, I would really love to talk to you, because we want to essentially enable all of those emerging identity ideas to be used. And the way we thought about it was, the best way we think we can do that is to follow standards such as decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials, things like that from W3C. But actually, that is the missing piece that we're looking to integrate with. So absolutely all for ENS and going deeper into all of the components that ENS can bring. But let's chat more about it.
Let me ask a question. Can you a bit describe how you actually struggle with incorrect data in your network, say cyber attacks, or like intentionally or non-intentional? Like you mentioned that you cannot struggle Byzantine type of behavior of users, right? So it's not planned to do that, or can you expose it a bit?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of different ways you can build, let's say, a decentralized knowledge graph. Has anyone ever you guys all used Wikipedia, for example. One of the big sort of hurdles about Wikipedia is a lot of people say you should not trust it because it's not great as an academic source and stuff like that. But Wikipedia has a bunch of people, a community behind, who are actually taking care that this knowledge is somehow true, this information that's there. Actually, there's Wikidata, which is the counterpart of Wikipedia. It's pretty much the same data, but in knowledge graph form, and you can query it, which is also really cool. The problem there is you have some authority, some group of people who decide, okay, what this should be inside or not. We go from the perspective of trusted knowledge infrastructure. So we provide tools to verify that certain knowledge asset has a certain issuer, audit trail, like I said, of information, identity connections, but we don't want to build into the infrastructure some, let's say, truth protocol. Rather, the idea is that anybody can publish any knowledge inside. So we don't say this is okay, this is not, but that actually by leveraging this information, who the knowledge issuer is, who the source is, whoever is on the querying side of things, on that top layer, knowledge asset application layer, actually gets to filter out, based with these primitives, some misinformation out of it. It's not an easy task, but we cannot essentially encode this directly into the protocol. Now, some cool ideas, for example, there's ideas in knowledge graphs where you have a certain community, like a DAO, that goes ahead and votes in a way, giving certain reputation to certain knowledge assets or people. And that makes sense. But again, it also brings us to the question, who are these people? Who is this DAO? So the approach we took was we built the actual infrastructure under the hood, and then whoever this entity is, be it the DAO, a company, a person that's querying this knowledge, actually gets to decide. So in a way, the similar principle as you do today. For example, I don't know where you're from, but I can say, for example, that we all know that, I don't know, Fox News and CNN are very different information sources. And depending on your preference, and who am I to say that you should not listen to Fox News, but like you can pick, like you can say, I don't like what these guys are saying or the way they're saying it, or maybe I'm going to somehow combine both. So it's a very, very broad question and absolutely on point, but it's not something that the technology aims to solve directly. However, supports the ability of somebody to understand if something is misinformation or not because of these key primitives, knowing the origin, knowing the audit trail of the information, and knowing the ownership of knowledge assets, or NFTs for knowledge, as I mentioned.
Thank you for all the questions. However, we are going to have to proceed with the next lecture.
Thanks,
but
everybody.
Let's give a round of applause.
Thank you.